A lot of people may not have paid attention to this, but USC has a new defensive coordinator. And his name is D'anton Lynn. And that name may sound familiar to you because he was the defensive coordinator for UCLA. So USC pretty much stole this dude from the rival. And I think he's going to be a big reason why they end up getting back into the playoff conversation in 2024 going into the Big Ten Conference. Some people were telling me that despite the fact that D'anton Lynn is a really good defensive coordinator, it's not going to be much because Lincoln Riley is the problem. Lincoln Riley is not the problem with the defense per se. The problem really was the dude that he hired. You can say that it may be a mentality thing with why this defense has underperformed. Maybe Lincoln Riley doesn't put enough emphasis on physicality in practice. But one thing about D'anton Lynn is that he's going to be able to get the most out of this defense. And with his personality, the players on this roster should be able to gravitate towards him. And his dad, Anthony Lynn, was the former head coach of the LA Chargers. So he comes from an NFL pedigree. This is somebody that's a really good communicator. And he transformed that Bruins defense from being 88th and, points per game and yards per game allowed last season into one of the better defenses in college football. UCLA this season, they were 18th in points per game allowed. They were 12th in yards per game allowed. They were really good getting off the field in third down situations. They were third against the run, and they were 12th in the nation in takeaways. USC, this defense couldn't stop a nosebleed at times. So even though you may think that Lincoln Riley is the problem, I doubt that this defense isn't going to be able to improve under D'anton Lynn. D'anton Lynn, I'm pretty sure Lincoln Riley is going to allow him to come in and do whatever he needs to do to have this defense playing at a championship level. Because when you're entering the Big Ten Conference, you got to be tough up front. And that's something that D'anton Lynn really preaches. The strength of UCLA's defense was their pass rush. Number 15, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, but he's probably going to be a first-round draft pick in next year's draft. UCLA had one of the best pass rushes, not just in the Pac-12, but in all of college football. USC needs more of that. They need somebody who can get the most out of the defensive line. When you're going to the Big Ten and you got to go up against Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, those are really physical football teams. You can't have a finesse mindset when you're going up against them. You got to be able to hone your own up front in the trenches. And that's been the biggest downfall of Lincoln Riley coached teams in the past. The defensive line play wasn't the best at Oklahoma when he was coaching there. And it hasn't really been that good for USC, despite them having a good amount of talent on that side of the ball. Their defensive line was good enough that I felt their pass rush should have been a lot better. You got Bear Alexander. That dude is good enough to be a first-round pick if he decides to leave for the draft. So the fact that USC's pass rush has underperformed the last couple of years, D'anton Lynn is going to be able to come in and clean that up. You're also going to have way better trench play, and you're going to be way better against the run, and you're going to need that to be able to have success in the Big Ten Conference. I think that D'anton Lynn was the perfect hire for USC, and this was the dude who I was saying that USC needed to go after all along. And when you listen to Chip Kelly talk about D'anton Lynn deciding to leave for USC, he sounds really hurt about it. And it sounded like they tried to do all they could to keep him around. They just couldn't match the money that USC had to pay him. And USC is paying this dude a lot of money to fix this defense, so you better believe that this isn't going to be one of those situations where he's going to have the luxury of this defense not being great year one under him. USC, they're expecting this defense to be great right away. And Lincoln Riley has a lot of pressure on him next year. And I think that this offense for USC isn't going to miss a beat at all, despite losing Caleb Williams. But this defense, they're the biggest question. And you address the biggest question by going ahead and getting one of the more talented defensive coordinators out there. USC wasn't the only program that wanted this dude. There were a lot of big-name programs who were going after this dude as well. The way Chip Kelly describes it, it came down to a bidding war pretty much. D'anton Lynn is the biggest piece of the puzzle for USC getting back in the playoff conversation, because there were really high playoff, expectations placed on this program coming into this season, and they weren't able to live up to that. And it wasn't because of the offense. It was mainly because the defense couldn't get big stops when it mattered the most. Against Washington, they couldn't get a stop. against Utah. Caleb Williams gets a touchdown to put USC in the lead, and then they allowed the pig farmer to get the Utes in the field goal range and ultimately win that game. There's been 2-3 games that USC has lost just based off defense alone. Bringing in D'anton Lynn, I'm expecting this guy to change this defense and have an immediate impact with this program. I don't think this is going to be a 2-3 year thing that's going to take a while to get going. I believe that this is one of these defensive coordinators that you hire, you bring in right away, and your defense drastically has an overhaul in performance. And with what he did at UCLA, he's going to be able to replicate that at USC due to the fact that he's going to have more access to more talent. UCLA's defense was talented, but the back end of their secondary, I don't really know about. And the fact that he was able to change that defense from being what it was, arguably the worst defense in the Pac-12, to one of the best in only the span of 1 year, gives me a lot of confidence that he's going to have this USC defense playing at a really high level in 2024. And they're going to need it, because when you're playing in this conference, you're not going to be able to just outscore everybody. Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State all have really great defenses. You're going to have to be able to get a couple of key stops to win you some of these big conference games that you're going to be going up against next season. So D'anton Lynn was a really massive hire for USC. Not a lot of people were talking about it because it got overshadowed due to conference championship weekend. But I really believe that this D'anton Lynn dude is going to be able to do wonders with this USC defense, and I expect him to be a big reason why the Trojans get back into the playoff conversation in 2024.